All right, guys. So the lecture this morning is mainly kind of like an overview of JavaScript, right? You guys have seen this in the algorithms. There's a bunch of concepts, and you're going to read all about that in the JavaScript chapter, right? That we're going to do today. And I'm going to kind of go over the plan for today and also the rest of this week, right? So you guys know exactly what's coming up and what the scope of the work is going to be, all right? So I made this handy little kind of like checklist for the stuff I want to cover today. I'm using this this app called Bear. It's like a really cool app that it's like this new thing that won the Apple Design Awards. Right. So, but I mean, I digress. Here, let's get started with some announcements. Right. I want to kind of get in the habit of kind of giving you guys the announcements first every day, so you're not like in the dark. My apologies for last week not letting you guys know about Sports Day. I'll let you know right now. Sports Day is on Wednesday, right? Every Wednesday we have Sports Day. Go out there, get some sun. It makes you a better developer to actually go out and be away from the screen for a while, right? This week is going to be project week for all the other stacks, right? All the other people are going to be doing the projects, so we're probably the only ones that are going to have lectures in the morning. Just keep that in mind. On Friday, we're going to have a demo day. So everybody who's working on a project on Friday, we get together in that room over there, and we have them demo their projects. So Friday is going to be kind of like disruptive, right? Just plan for that. Exam grading. Me and Kevin are going to be grading the exams today. Depends. We do have a large cohort, so it depends on how fast we can get it done. Hopefully we'll get it done before, I want to say like Tuesday or Wednesday, right? So as we grade them, we're going to send you the results. And please be patient, and we're gonna get it all graded for you, right? Okay, so plan for the day, right? Today, let's look at the platform here, right? Okay, I'm gonna make this larger. So today, we're gonna get into JavaScript, right? So last week you did introduction before you came in, HTML Git on the first day, and then we did CSS all the way up until Friday, right? So today we're jumping into JavaScript, and you see JavaScript, you have this fundamental concepts. There's a lot of reading. Most of it is review, right? And there's some assignments there. Every one of these assignments should have an answer sheet. If it doesn't, and you want the answers, then just Slack me, and I'll get you an answer for it, right? But I mean, these things should be pretty basic. You should get through this very quickly. Mostly it's just reading, and it's going to be a recap of what we cover, right? So this one, Fundamentals 1, some more reading, right? Some array stuff. Fundamentals 2, some more reading here, and then there's some more array stuff here, and then at the very end, there's this chapter on objects, and we want you guys to get through all of this stuff, and this will be the assignment that is the goal for the end of today, right? So today we're getting through all of this stuff in the arrays chapter. Most of it is going to be readings, all right? So tomorrow, we're going to cover jQuery, right? So jQuery, this panel here will be the first part of jQuery. We're going to get that done tomorrow. And then on Wednesday, we're going to go into advanced jQuery and this stuff. So we have 2 days to get through jQuery, right? And then on Thursday, we're going to go through APIs and AJAX, right? So this chapter is fairly short, but it'll be, it's pretty important to know that AJAX and jQuery. Once you guys have like a background in jQuery, AJAX and APIs will become a lot easier, right? So we're going to do this on Thursday, and then Friday will be generally like a catch-up day, and then there's demo day on Friday. So you might not have too much time to work, but that is the goal for this week, right? So that's done. That's done. Right, now we can get into some of the meat of this lecture, right? Some JavaScript stuff, right? So I want to kind of talk to you guys about, how to, get started with making something like a JavaScript assignment, right? So this is going to be a recap. But before I go into this, any questions about, the administrative stuff? Right, we good? So there's no exams this week. It's all just working, and next Monday you'll get started on Python. Right, and I think Abby will be your instructor, right? So she's very good. She's a genius. right. So let's get started with some of the JavaScript fundamental stuff, right? You guys have seen this in the algos, right? Today you're really gonna get into like the actual chapter of JavaScript, and there's gonna be some assignments, and I want to kind of show you guys how to get started with those things and how to submit them, right? So let's say I'm gonna make a new folder here. I'm just gonna call it JS Basics Demo, like that, right? We're gonna open up Atom, and we're gonna drag this folder into Atom, right? So now that we have this folder here, we're gonna go ahead and create a new file, call that index.html, right? Now that we have index.html, we can go ahead and autocomplete the HTML. All right, I'm gonna make this a little bigger for you guys to see. All right, we're gonna call this JS Basics, and here, the head is where you want to put your JavaScript, right? So there's a few ways you can put JavaScript in your HTML files. You can either put it directly in here, or you can create another file to link to it. If you want to put it directly in here, you just need to make a script tag and put the JavaScript in between the script tag. So let's go ahead and make a script tag. And then in here, we can console log stuff. We can write JavaScript. Let's say, hello world, like that. And in order to see this being logged, you want to go to open up a browser, and you want to, just like before, you want to drag the HTML file into your browser, right? So you don't see anything, but if you open up the inspect and go to the console, you'll see that the thing that you logged is now here in the console, right? So that's where you will find your console logs, right? So for all of these assignments, I want you guys to use Google Chrome. If you're not familiar with it, please download Google Chrome. It's going to be your best friend if you're working in JavaScript and front end, because Chrome has a lot of these really nice, developer tools that we're going to be using, and I'm going to be using them in my demos. Okay. All right. So let's put this guy over here so we can see both of these sides. All right. So a good way to work is to have your code on one side and then the browser open on the other side so you can see what you're doing, right? So here, if I change that and save it and I refresh this page, you're going to see that change in your console, right? So this is one way of using JavaScript and running JavaScript code, right? So another way is to make another file, right? We're going to right-click, new file, and we're just going to call this, app.js or some kind of name, right? And it has to be a .js file. It stands for JavaScript, right? So once it's a .js file, you can start writing JavaScript in here. So let's move this guy over to the side, like that. And we're going to move our console log into the app.js file. And if it's .js extension, you don't have to write the script anymore, right? So in order to link this file, this HTML file, to the app.js file, you're going to have to do that via script tag. And the way you do it is you declare a thing called, I believe it's source, src, like that. And you tell it the path. So in this case, the path is directly in the same directory called app.js. So we're just going to put app.js here, right? Now, let's see if it worked. Let's go refresh this. There we go. See, app.js line 1. So Google Chrome will actually tell you which line this guy is console logging on. So it's really good for debugging, all right? Cool. Any questions on how to actually use JavaScript in your HTML? Right? Pretty straightforward. Very much like CSS. There's slight differences in the syntax, but you can do it either in your HTML file or in an external file. And as you guys submit your assignments, you can just zip up this folder here and submit that folder, right? Question?
Do you want us to zip the folder even if we only do it in the HTML, or can we just submit the index.html?
You could do that. I mean, if it's just one file, you can just submit that one file. But typically, you want to kind of keep different folders for each assignment, right? So it's more organized, and then just zip up that folder and just send it in. That'll be the easiest way to do it. Yeah. Okay. So printing to the browser, console log, use Google Chrome. We did that. All right. Let's talk about variables and functions. Right. So this should all be just review for you guys. Variables, we declared them like that. Right. So let's say we have an array that's equal to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, like that. Right? So this is declaring and assigning array, like that. Or this is variable rather. Right? If I wanted to just declare without assignment, I just do that. This is just declaring. And then I will assign a value to that variable.
It was such a great shirt.
Okay?
Oh, yeah.
X equals to
It was a yellow shirt.
high. Okay? Pretty straightforward. This stuff, it's all review, right? Now, functions, right? We're going to write our functions in JavaScript just like we did in the algos. Say function, say hello. Inside of the function, we're just going to console log hello world. All right? And if we're going to run the function, we're going to just call the function name and run the function with the parentheses, like that. Right? So now if we run this code, we should see app.js line 15 right here. It's console logging hello. Right? Now, there's a few ways. There's actually two ways we can declare functions. One of them is like this. It's called a name function, named function, like that. As you can see, we gave the function a name, so we can call that function using that name anywhere else in our code. Right? There's another way you can declare a function. You can make an anonymous function, which is a function that is saved somewhere else in like a variable. Say, let's say create a variable, say anon function. That's a variable. We're declaring it, and we're setting the variable equal to a function without a name, like that. Oops. Whoa. Yeah. So this function, whatever I put in here, let's say we're going to console log, hey, I have no name, like that, right? So now, this function is an anonymous function. It's anonymous because this function itself does not have a name. The only way I can call this function is if I save that function in the variable that has a name, right? So the difference is this function is a standalone function. It can just be there and be called. But this function here, it's not standalone. It's an anonymous function, right? So this is actually called standalone. Standalone. This is is that how you spell it? Or whatever. Yeah. A-N-O-N-Y. There you go. Okay. So these are the two types of functions. If I wanted to run this function, instead of calling the function name, which it doesn't have, I just call the variable name. Right? So I do that, and if I refresh the page, there we go. App.js line 24, right here. Okay? So that's the difference between standalone and anonymous functions. Now, let's take a look at what's next. Okay, named functions, anonymous functions, saved in variables, calling, running, executing functions, right? So these three names, they mean the same thing, right? So when we declare a function, it doesn't do anything. It only does the thing that we write in there after we call the function. it's also, we can also say we execute the function, or we, there's different names for it, but they all mean the same thing: calling, running, executing, right? So in order for us to trigger the function to happen, we need to tell it to happen. Okay. All right. So good. Looks like we're moving through this pretty quickly. Are there any questions so far? Yeah.
If you were to use the can you do an anonymous function that has an argument in it?
Yeah. So let's say I'm making a function and I'm saying that, hey, this is a word or anything, any name that you give it. And I'm just going to console log this thing. Right? So, and then when I run it, I'll just give it some kind of thing. That'll be saved here when I run, and it'll console log it. Same exact way, right? So if we look at it, there we go. Right, so arguments, you guys should be familiar with that. If I have two arguments, I separate them with a comma, like that. And I can say word1 plus some kind of divider plus word2, like that. Okay, and if I'm going to run the function, then the arguments will be separated with a comma as well. Like that, right? And these are in order. So the first argument that I give it is going to be in the first argument name that I define. The second argument I give it is going to be saved in the second argument name I define. And then I have access to both of them in my function, right? So let's look at that. There we go. Hello world. Okay. All right. Let's take a look at function scoping. All right. So this might be a new word for you guys, but on this JavaScript file, there's this thing called the global scope. All right. The global scope is basically like the main kind of page that we're working on. So everything here is a global variable, and when it's defined in a global scope, it's considered a global thing, right? So I make a variable in the global scope called array. Now this guy will be available in all of my functions. It's visible within my functions without me having to pass them in. So let's say in this function here, I want to console log R. So I'm looking at this guy. Even though I didn't pass it in, I can still do that, and it'll see this guy in the global scope. Right? So let's take a look. There we go. JavaScript line 18, it console logged that. Right? So everything in the global scope is visible inside of functions. But if I make a function, if I make a variable inside of a function, let's say name, make that Andy. I don't see it in the global scope. So I can't do console log, say log name. I won't be able to see this variable outside of this function. Anywhere outside of the function, this guy will be invisible. Right? So let's take a look at what it does when I run this code. Nothing. Right? It's not there. So this variable is what we're called scoped to the function, to within that function. So this guy only lives between the opening and closing curly braces of whatever function that is being defined in, right? So basically what it is the parent things can, or the children things can see their parents' stuff, but the parents cannot see within the children, right? So the more specific it's defined, the more specific the scope will be, right? So, and this can be very dangerous because if I'm doing something within a function and I automatically say, hey, what if I want to do r.pop like that? I'm actually accessing the global variable. So everywhere else, all of a sudden that thing has changed too, right? So I'm going to call this function first, right here. It's going to do this to the global variable, and then I'm going to call this function here, and then we're going to see what the changes are to that global variable, right? So if we look at that, there we go. See, we popped it And now for everybody else, that variable is now minus one thing. So it can be very dangerous if you have global variables and you accidentally access them within your functions, because then it'll affect all the other functions that look at that same thing. Okay. Any questions about function scoping? Right, pretty straightforward question. You can. You can write a function inside of a function, but that just means that now let's say this: we're writing a function, let's say log stuff. Right. So here we have a variable called name. Inside of this function, I have access to the thing in my parent. I have access to everything that contains me. So this function contains this guy, and the global scope contains this function. So I can have access to that, all of the variables that are above, like in a bigger scope than me, right? So I can have array as well. So we console log line 23, line 24. Oops. Why is it not console log? I didn't call the function, right? There we go. There we go, line 23, line 24. So we have access to these variables. But if I create a variable here, like that, I don't have access to that in my parent, right? So function scoping applies as well. There, I won't see that. See, y is not defined, right? So this y will only be available within the scope of the function I'm defined in. But because this is inside of this guy, he has access to all of his variables and also the global scope, right? All right, so next thing, return values. Okay, so return values, I'm going to use this example that I gave some of you guys, but the return value ends the function and it gives back whatever was returned to the function call. Okay, so I guess this is best illustrated with an example here. So I'm going to make a function called +1. It's taking in a number, right? And it's going to return the number plus plus, right? So number +1. So now, if I call this function, oops, say 1, it should return 2, right? But if I run this, I'm not going to see anything, because just because it returned it, it's not going to put it on the console, right? So now, if I wanted to actually see what it's returning, I have to put a console log, and then I'm going to console log the thing that it returns. Like that. Right? So now if we look at it, 1. Or like that. Right, let's take a look. There we go. 2. Yeah, I'm not sure why it didn't work. It should have worked. I can also do plus equals to 1. That should work. Yeah, that works too. I don't know why this didn't work. I'll have to get back to you guys on that. But okay. But the idea is the thing that it returned to me is now put in the place of the function call, right? So I can do something like this. I can say +1 plus +1 of 5, right? So if I run this, I should get, that's 2, that's 6, so I should get 8, right? So what happens is when I run this, this guy gets run with 1 in this argument. It returns 1 plus 1, that's 2. So this guy becomes 2. And then this will get run with a 5 in here. 5 plus 1 is 6, so this becomes 6. And then this will evaluate, and it'll become 8. And then it'll console log at the very end, right? Make sense? Cool. Yeah, everything inside of the console log will get evaluated first before the console log actually happens. Okay. Likewise, I can put these guys in variables as well. If I make a variable called results, set that equal to, plus 1, 10, and then console log this result, I'm going to see 11 being console logged. Okay, so that's how we use return statements. If we don't save them, then they're pretty much useless, right? Now, it's worthy to note that in JavaScript, let's say return nothing. If I don't return anything and I console log it, it should return me undefined. Right? So by default, it's going to return by default. Okay? Now let's take a look at what this will give us. Line 58. Undefined. Right? So in JavaScript, if you don't tell it what you're returning, it runs everything in that function, and then at the very end, before it exits the function, it returns you undefined. Right? Let's take a look at for loops. You guys know for loops, while loops. Okay. So let me let's do something with a for loop, right? And let's do something with a while loop, right? I'll show you guys the similarities there. And this is very basic. It's review, right? Let's say that in this function, I'm giving it an array, right? So let's give it an array here. Say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, like that. If I'm going to make a for loop to iterate over this array and console log everything on it, I just simply make a 3-part for loop. So for var I equals 0, I is less than array.length, I plus plus. And here, I'm just going to console log array of index I. Right? Let's take a look at what it does. Boom. 1, 2, 3, or 5. There we go. Console log all of these guys. Now, if I wanted to do the same thing using a while loop, how would I do that? What do I need first? You need this, right? That's the first step, or step 0. Right? So we're going to define a variable called, let's say, j, make it equal to 0. Okay? So this step replaces this step here. Okay? And then we start the while loop. While some condition, right? While some condition, do this stuff in the block. So the condition is going to be this step, right? So it's the same thing as we did in the 3-part for loop. But here we're going to say if j is less than array.line. Okay? And then inside of the while loop, we do the thing that we want to do, which is this one. Oops. Copy that. Array of j. Right? We're going to console log it. And we need one more thing for this to actually work. We need an increment. We need to increment j, right? If we run this right now, literally it'll go infinitely. And it's going to console log array of index 0 forever, which is going to be 1 forever. Right? I don't want to do that because it might crash the computer. So we're going to make j increment up. And then this is exactly the same as that. Right? So let's take a look. Boom. 1, 2, 3, or 5. 1, 2, 3, or 5. Right? This is the for loop. That's the while loop. Right? So exact same thing, just written in a different way. Right? Now, there's also this thing called the do while loop. Right? So there's really not that many loops to remember. For loop is one of them. While loop is another one. And I think the other one that you'll see is the do while. So the only difference between while and do while is that the do while will do something first, and then it'll check the condition, like that. Right? So this guy will check the condition first to see if I want to do it. But this one will do the thing first and then check if I want to do it again. That's the only difference. Right? So for cases where you want to do something first, let's say console log first, and then while I'm going to write false in here because we don't want it to do it again. Then we're going to see that this happens one time, and then this checks to see if I want to do it again, which is false, so it won't do it again. Right? There we go, first, and it doesn't happen again. Okay? All right. So, okay, objects. Let's take a look at objects inside of JavaScript, right? So, objects, in JavaScript, right? So, if I want to make an object in JavaScript, let's say object, I use the curly braces like that, right? So this is object notation. Similarly, how we did array with the square bracket, objects are made using curly braces, right? So objects will have things called properties. So here I can say, object, name. That will be a property, right? You use a colon to state what you're going to give that property, assign that property. And here I'm just going to say Andy. And if I want to give it another property, I use the comma, right? So here I can say, fave movie, and here I can say, matrix, or something like that. Here, fave show, say Black Mirror, right? So this is an object. Now, the object has 3 properties. These properties have names, and I can console log the property like that, and let's see what we get on line 90. There we go, see? app.js line 90, we can open this object up, and this is only because we're using Google Chrome. Other browsers might not allow you to do that. But we can see inside of the object, we see that it has, and if I hover over it, you'll see that it's .favemovie. So that gives us a hint as to how to access these properties.
Is it just self-advertised? Is that why?
Yeah, it is in no order, right? The reason it's not in any order is because in objects, things are not ordered, right? And if we want to access these things, we don't use indexes, but we access them via the property name. So now it makes it easy for us to kind of try to get the name of something. Instead of trying to remember the index of where that is saved, we save it in what's called a property, right? So there's a key value pair kind of. The key is going to be whatever we give it, the name is, and then the value will be the thing that we save on that key, right? So if we want to access this guy, all we have to do is console log object dot the key, like that, object dot name, and then we'll see that Andy, app.js line 91, right? So we can access different properties by using the key, like that, with a dot notation, right? Right, so that's the basic rundown of objects. They're very useful. Later on, you're going to learn something called object-oriented programming. That is basically, you're using objects to create a structure a structure for your code so that everything is, it's kind of, it's not repeated. Everything is there and you're referencing them, through different pointers, okay? One last thing for today. I want to briefly touch on variable hoisting, function hoisting, right? So a lot of you guys, and this has to do with how the JavaScript is actually run, right? So this is like a little meme that I found, and I'm sure they mean JavaScript when they said that, right? So what happens is I can declare a variable and access that variable under it, right? But what if I do it? What if I try to access this before I define it, right? Let's say object here. What do you think is going to happen if I run this? It's going to be undefined. Well, let's take a look. Line 82. undefined. Line 82. Well, let's take a look at this. Undefined. Oh.
Is it not supposed to be undefined? Is that what it?
Apparently.
Oh, okay. Okay, yeah, it's my bad. So, okay, so this is what happens, all right? So, if we run this and we say console log array like that, it's going to tell me that it's undefined on line 3, right? But what if I try to console log something that doesn't exist? Let's say array like that, or like with some other y's in here. So we know for sure that this doesn't exist. Let's see what happens. Uncaught reference, array is not defined, right? It gives me an error on line 4, but it doesn't give me an error on line 3. And the reason it doesn't give me that error for this one is because of something called function and variable hoisting, right? So what happens in JavaScript is before anything is executed, the browser or whatever it is that's running this code will kind of parse through each line of JavaScript, and it's going to rearrange some things. And once it does that, then it's going to run everything, right? So what happens is it reads through everything, and if it has the keyword variable, it's going to take the variable declaration and it's going to put it all the way to the very top, right? So literally what happens is it goes like this. It reads that. Okay, that's not a variable, that's not a variable, that's not a variable. This is a variable, and I'm going to declare this guy on the very top now. So it's like var array without anything, right? And then it's going to do this, and this is the line I'm going to assign the variable. So it hoists up the declaration of variables to the top. That's why when we did this console log, it gave us undefined, because we know that if we declare something but we don't give it a value, it's undefined, right? And if we don't have it in there at all, it's going to give us an error saying that the thing is not there, right? So for every single variable on this page, var x, this guy gets hoisted up as well, like that. Functions get hoisted as well, but they will be hoisted under all of the variables. So it reads through everything, and it hoists up all the variables, and then it goes reads through it again, and it hoists up all the functions, so that we can call functions even before they were declared on the procedural line, right? So this guy will actually get hoisted up all the way to the top right here, okay? And the same thing goes for these guys. Variables within functions will get hoisted up to the top of their scope. So let's say we had this here, okay? It's going to hoist up this declaration to the top of the scope, like that. And then it's going to assign the value at the line that you said that it was going to be assigned on. Question.
What would be the point of that? Why would we need that?
So it does this because of these things, right? If you don't do that and you try to access something, then it's really going to give you an error and it's going to stop everything, right? But if you hoist it up, it's just going to give you some undefined error and everything will continue to execute.
But why would you want to call it before you define it to give it a value?
Well, sometimes you don't know where the function is defined, but you want to run some stuff on it, right? So the idea is like, it's like housekeeping. You want to have all the stuff you're going to use be declared first, and then it doesn't matter where in your code you're actually accessing, right? So let's say that this function say hello is here, but I can call this function on top here, and this will work because this guy will get hoisted up above that, right? So we run it. Yeah, so this is not defined now, right? Because we didn't give it a value, so that's undefined. Undefined does not have an attribute called .pop. That's why I gave you the error, right? There we go. So everything's still running. Okay, so that is a basic I want you guys to just be aware that this happens, right? It's not like something that you have to memorize, but if you see something weird like that, just know that this actually does happen behind the scenes, and you know, just be mindful that that's JavaScript. Okay. I think that's it. Are there any questions? So the goal for today is to get everything in JavaScript done. So just to kind of recap, this entire thing we want to get done today. And then this entire thing we have 2 days, Tuesday and Wednesday, to get done. And then on Thursday, we're going to go into API and AJAX, right? So that is it for this week. For today, there is a lot of reading. So as you can see, there's a lot of reading, but the good thing is that, you know, each of these things are kind of short, so you can kind of breeze through these very quickly, right? So we want to get through all of this stuff, and then by the end of today, the goal is to get students and instructors done in the JavaScript, right? And if you do have time, these are pretty fun. JS Scroll and JavaScript circles. These are kind of really fun, like mini games kind of thing. So if you do have time, these optional assignments are pretty interesting. So that's the goal for today. All right. Yeah. Well, it's a lot of reading, but it's mostly review. So.